Welcome guys, today we're gonna talk about something which every mechanic and person who wants to diagnose his engine needs to know. That if the mechanic doesn't know what I'm talking about, he shouldn't be called a mechanic. Also a person who's trying to diagnose their car on DIY basis should know that. That will save you a lot of time, effort and money on part swapping. So today, basic things about electronic injection and what's ECU, what's computer of the engine is actually designed to do. It's designed to control the injector, which is deciding how much fuel and when the fuel is added to the engine. So to actually control that injector, ECU needs to have some data gathered over the system. Like we have crankshaft sensor, camshaft sensors, both on top in the cylinder head. So ECU knows each angle, everything. When everything is fine, the engine is cranking, the angles are okay, ECU is able to supply pulses to the injectors and spark plugs to fire up the engine. As soon as you fire up the engine, MAF, which is located here, which is this device, is telling you, well, it's telling ECU how much air is going into the engine. It's the fuel and air is burned and ends up in the exhaust system. That's pretty normal, but today's cars, they are about efficiency. The ECU is trying to control the fuel and air ratio to get the most from the fuel, to produce as less emissions as possible and produce as much power as possible. So we're talking about stoichiometry, which is 14.7 parts of air to 1 part of fuel. ECU wants to get this situation all the time, as much as possible, to get this ratio. When the engine is cold, we're gonna get maybe 1.2, which is 14.7 parts of air to 1.2 parts of fuel. That's because the engine is cold and needs to warm up quicker. Later it should go back to 1. And this is the situation when ECU wants to be always. But how to control that? As we know, MAF, O2 sensor, some other sensors, but these two are the most important. They are responsible for emissions, power, and roughness, everything. So if you have rough idle, like I said on other videos, you want to check compression, or maybe not the compression. I was telling about leak down test, which is very good. Later you want to check fuel pressure on your system, fuel pressure test. If you did that, you want to check other bits and pieces which I already mentioned on last video about vanos, about sensors, but today I'm gonna explain you something which, like I said, you should know to just save your time, which is fuel trims. How to understand fuel trims, which is very simple. It's nothing new. Some people who know what I'm talking about, they already know. So that's why I'm making videos for fresh people, for new car owners, not only BMW owners. This is nothing new. You can find that everywhere on YouTube, but I just want to make my own video about this. So we got MAF, we got engine, we got O2 sensor. For example, let's say this is 2.5 liter engine, displacement same as mine, and what are fuel trims? For example, let's say MAF is reading 11.5 kilograms per hour of air going into the engine, which is true, at 700 RPM, which is very good. Fuel is ignited with air, it's getting burned and ends up in the system, exhaust system. And what's happening? We got three types of auto sensors, well, lambda sensors. One is auto sensor, which is detecting only oxygen, which is very common sensor. The other one is wideband auto sensor, and also we got air and fuel mixture sensor, but we are focusing on auto sensor. What it's doing is detecting amount of oxygen inside the exhaust system as well as outside. If that amount is even, is equal, it will be very happy and it will feed some information to the ECU. So we also see something like a wave on our scan tool, which is giving readings in volts, somewhere between 0.1 to 0.9 volts, usually it's like 0.2, 0.8, and is giving that wave pattern every second, up and down, up and down. What's happening? It's not the auto sensor which is giving you that reading. That reading is created, well, it is by auto sensor, but auto sensor sensing lean, rich, lean, rich, lean, rich. Why? Because that's the ECU job to give every second richer amount of mixture, which is more fuel. Later gives less fuel, more, less, more, less. It's constantly adjusting. Why is doing it? Because some of the stuff in the fuel in the exhaust system are burned in higher temperatures, and some stuff are burned, like toxic gases are burned in a bit lower temperature. That's why it's adjusting up and down to burn all that stuff, and on the end of the day it's still creating an average of 0.45 volts. That's what we want to see all the time. But if the amount of air outside and inside the exhaust system is different, for example, let's say we got less amount of oxygen inside, but in atmospheric environment there's more. We got rich condition, that means there's more fuel, unburned fuel, because there's less oxygen added to the engine, and auto sensor is sensing that. So the wave gonna look like this, around 0.8, maybe 0.9 volt, and your graph of auto sensor gonna look like this. If we have more oxygen inside, like loads, and less outside, that means it's gonna be lean condition, because auto sensor is sensing more oxygen inside, which is the stoichiometry is not as it's supposed to be. Maybe there's maybe more parts of air to part of fuel. So our graph gonna look like this. It's gonna be lean. The auto sensor gonna show you like lean condition on its own graph. So if you scanning your car or engine with some kind of diagnostic tool, and you have a graph readings, and you see your auto sensor looking like this, don't replace the auto sensor, because your auto sensor might be working. It's just showing you that there's something wrong inside the engine, like from here to the front of the engine, including the MAF. And most people who contacting me, they always talking about problem. They doing some kind of scan, they have rough idle, they don't know what to do. They showing me screenshots of their ENPA BMW scanner, and the most thing they doing wrong is that MAF air consumption is around, for example, 9 kilograms per hour, where this engine should have like 11.5, or if it's 3 liter, should be around 13 kilograms per hour. That's why there's a big evidence in your scan tool showing that there's something wrong. The amount of air that MAF is showing is wrong, or the MAF itself is bad. So maybe vacuum leak, or MAF itself is wrong. So what's happening here? If we have only 9 kilograms of air per hour instead of, for example, 11.5. So what's happening? This engine at 700 RPM, it will always consume around 11.5 kilograms per hour, because that's how it was designed. 2.5 liter version. Here we have 4 cylinders, but we know we got 6 cylinders. Piston's gonna always suck the same amount of air at this level of RPM, but MAF is showing only 9 kilograms. Let's assume the MAF is contaminated. Inside there's a wire which is dirty, and it's reading only 9 kilograms per hour. So MAF giving readings to ECU that there's only 9 kilograms, so please supply adequate amount of fuel to the injectors, and we should be fine. But when the fuel is burned, auto sensor is sensing something wrong, because the amount of air is actually higher than 9 kilograms, because the MAF is dirty and is lying. So the amount of air is actually hasn't changed, but you see adding fuel to this situation, which is a lot less. So inside there will be more air than outside. So auto sensor is saying that we have a lean condition, because the amount of air is different, is bigger than it's when it's actually read by the ECU, but amount of fuel is smaller. So we got lean condition, and our readings on the auto sensor is going to be low. For example, 1.0 volt. So what's are actually fuel trims? Fuel trims are its ability of ECU to correct the situation, because there's some kind of situation like bad MAF, bad readings from MAF, or maybe vacuum leak somewhere, which is unmeasured air going into the engine. It's not passing the MAF, so MAF cannot be able to read that, but there's still air going to the engine. That's why auto sensor, its job is to sense the condition of air and fuel mixture. It's very simple. So ECU is getting readings from auto sensor to correct the situation. We know the new engine probably not gonna have any issues, because everything is new, but over time, like I did many videos about vacuum leaks, other stuff where the vacuum leak might be on a M54 engine or M52 TU, any engine, is the same principle. For example, broken hose, cracking the rubber hose over time, that's vacuum leak. We know MAFs are tend to go like usually after 100,000 miles. We know that. So if you guys see something wrong, bad readings on the auto sensor, don't replace the auto sensor. That's the last thing to replace on your car. For example, let's say MAF is reading 15 kilograms of air per hour instead of 11.5. Let's say everything is sealed. It's just a MAF which is lying because it's old and giving not correct information to the ECU. So, okay, so ECU saying, well, the MAF is saying to ECU, listen, I got 15 kilograms of air, and to keep this stoichiometry, we need more fuel. So ECU is adding adequate amount of fuel to 15 kilograms of air instead of 11.5. Everything is fine, but when the fuel is getting burned, auto sensor sensing something like this. Listen, the amount of air inside the engine is still 11.5 because that's how it was designed. But you saying there's 15 kilograms of air and ECU is adding a lot of more of fuel. So what's gonna happen? There will be very little air inside. I mean oxygen, plenty outside, because there's too much fuel added for the actual real amount of air added or sucked by the engine. It's not 15 because the MAF is lying. So what's happening? We have very rich condition. Auto sensor is sensing very rich condition. So the graph of the auto sensor is gonna look like this: rich. High voltage means rich, low voltage means lean. And again, based on those voltages from the auto sensor, again, they are fed to ECU. ECU can correct that situation. But what's happening? Again, because we have just bad readings from MAF, the actual amount of air is the same. Amount of fuel added is too high. So what's gonna happen? ECU gonna take off that fuel to bring down this graph again. And if the auto sensor gonna start producing good readings, which is wave pattern up and down between 0.1 0.9, the ECU gonna be happy, and that's it. That's what's this is all about correction of fuel. ECU is designed to control injectors based on few readings from MAF auto sensor. So if you have any like problem with like power delivery, rough idle, some hesitation, stuff like that, it's more likely the MAF to be bad instead of auto sensor. But later I will tell you more about auto sensors behind the catalytic converter, but still need to explain you fuel trims. So what are the fuel trims? We got two types of fuel trims: short-term fuel trims and long-term fuel trims. Short-term fuel trims are just like momentary fuel trims, which are actually showing you straight away what's going on. Long-term fuel trims showing you situation when the problem occurs, like for longer period of time, and ECU have to adjust them to show the problem and to set new point of baseline base of the operation of the engine. Short-term fuel trims. What's happening? We are plus, minus, or positive, negative fuel trims. Same in here. If we have new engine or fully working good condition engine, we're gonna see short-term fuel trims, something like that, oscillating between 1, plus 2, or minus 2, and long-term fuel trims, that's gonna be straight line around 0, which is like highly unlikely, but usually plus 2, minus 2, that's okay, nothing happening. So we see short-term fuel trims oscillating up and down, long-term fuel trims are dead. That's the dead line around small numbers close to 0. What's happening if we have vacuum leak? For example, vacuum leak, so there's like more air, for example 16 parts of air to 1 part of fuel. We have a vacuum leak, we have more air going into the engine, so voltage of the O2 sensor gonna be low. It's gonna be very low. So what's happening here? If we have too much air instead of fuel, this plus means the same plus in here and same here. It means add fuel. So it means I'm lean, please add fuel. That's the command going to ECU. So if you have a vacuum leak, ECU gonna trim the fuel trims, and we're gonna see something like this, and it's gonna stop in the point where the ECU and everything is happy. So for example, let's say that's around plus 20. If you remove your oil filler cap, you're gonna see something like around 15 plus 20. So that's okay, nothing happening. ECU is preventing the engine from stopping, from stalling. It's adding more fuel because it's lean. Please add fuel, and engine is able to run again. But we're gonna close the oil cap, and fuel trims are going down back to 0, and they still oscillating like around 0, and everybody are happy. What's happening if we not gonna close that oil cap? For longer time we're gonna drive, for example, let's just say few miles, 10 minutes, maybe hour. And here what's happening? Long-term fuel trims, they're gonna start looking at this guy, and oh, the situation is happening for too long, so we need to adjust. We need to set new baseline. The 0 is here, and fuel trims, long-term fuel trims, gonna go up same amount of 20. It means when this line gonna be based at 20 for longer time, short-term fuel trims gonna go back to 0, and that 0 is gonna be moved at plus 20. So new short-term fuel trims, well, it's still gonna be 0, but at plus 20. That's gonna be the new situation for the ECU to run the car properly. Well, it's not gonna be running properly because we obviously got some kind of problem. You can sense that by, well, smelling or the fumes from the tailpipe, or the engine is rough, but it's running. That's why the ECU added fuel to make this car run. Instead of that, if you don't have fuel trims, if ECU is not able to adjust the amount of fuel going to the engine is gonna die. You're not gonna get anywhere. But you still need to fix that. You need to find the problem and fix that. That's why car manufacturers supplying those information for you, for mechanics, to check that and see what the car is doing. Let's say we got blocked or something wrong with the fuel delivery. For example, weak pump, weak fuel pump, or the fuel filter is blocked and is not giving enough pressure, and we just don't know that. But what's happening? There's less fuel in the system, so straight away there's going to be more air in the system, because amount of air is the same at 700 rpm. Engine is sucking 11.5 kilograms per hour. Math is working great, is giving those readings, but amount of fuel is smaller, because there's, instead of 3.5 bar, we got only 3 bars of pressure. So what's happening? Same, we got lean condition, because we got more air for part of fuel, which gives us a reading of auto sensor, again low. Small voltage on auto sensors, and again short-term fuel trim is gonna show you again something like this, because plus means add fuel. I got not enough fuel because the pressure is lower than it's supposed to be. We don't know that because somebody didn't check the fuel pressure, but we don't know that. That's why it's easier to check the fuel trims, what they're doing. So please add fuel, because amount of air is correct, but amount of fuel is smaller, because the pressure is smaller. So let's say around +5. We got lean condition, add fuel. And again, if we not changing or fixing the fuel issue problem, for example, we didn't have time to change the fuel filter, maybe there's a problem with fuel pressure regulator, but fuel pressure regulator is going to be different. I'm going to explain it in a minute. And we didn't change the fuel filter. Let's say the short-term fuel trims are set at +5, so it's running lean, and it's adding about 5% of fuel to maintain correct operation of the engine. And we driving like that, for example, 6 months, because we didn't have time, or we just actually don't know, because it's very hard to find a problem with correction like +5. You can't even notice that by driving the car. So if we're driving for too long, the fuel trims, long-term fuel trim is gonna be set same as +5. If that's gonna be set, short-term fuel trim is gonna go back to 0, which new 0 is gonna be set at 5+. That's gonna be the new 0. When we're changing the fuel system, we're doing something with the fuel system. What's happening? Everything comes back to normal, to 0. This +5 is actually the correct 0, and everything runs fine. But now I'm gonna explain you what's happening if we got bad fuel pressure regulator, which I did explain how it works in previous video. You can check that if you want, no problem. Fuel pressure regulator, or vacuum line going into it, which is controlling the diaphragm inside, which is opening and closing at idle or higher RPM. So what's happening? Let's say the vacuum line is cracked, there's a hole, usually happens, we know that, there's many threads about that. What's happening? We got no vacuum to pull the diaphragm, and the fuel is not returning to fuel tank, it's kept inside the fuel rail, which is raising the fuel pressure inside the injectors. Injectors are basically adding more fuel. The pressure is around, for example, 4 bars instead of 3.5. So we got more fuel going into the intake. What's happening? Auto sensor is reading rich because the amount of air is the same, but amount of fuel is higher. So let's say something around 0.7. Auto sensor is sensing rich condition. What's happening? Fuel trim is gonna react other way, which is negative, means subtract fuel, take some fuel off because auto sensor is reading too rich. So let's say we had 5 positive, now we're gonna have -5. ECU is taking off fuel by controlling the ejectors, and that's fine. And we don't know nothing about the cracked vacuum hose, so we drive another 6 months like that. So again, long-term fuel trim is going to be set at -5 again, and it's very hard to find the problem because, like I said, with +5 plus -5, it's very hard to actually notice any change to the engine. You need to just know your car very good, like I do, and I know when it's something happening, when the car is pulling good and when it's pulling bad. So if I sensing that, I straight away connecting my snap-on and checking what's going on. That's how I found the problem with MAF connection. I had the same problem. My fuel trims were about -7. I did video about that. You can check my channel and what was causing that. I checked everything. I did engine rebuild. I basically new engine, but fuel trims was -7. So ECU was taking fuel off my engine, where amount of air at 700 RPM was correct. MAF was changed. Previous MAF died anyway, but new MAF correct readings. But what happened? Somehow connection between ECU and MAF was not great, and I did a video about that, like I said before. That's why the fuel trim was low. Now I'm back nearly to 0 when I did small quick fix with the connection. So you need to be careful. Sometimes it's not very obvious, like when or why we have positive or negative fuel trim. More likely you're gonna get positive fuel trims because, like I said, usually vacuum leak, that's the most common problem in cars, any cars, not only BMW, because you got many types of connections like plastic, rubbers, O-rings, vacuum hoses, stuff like that. So positive fuel trims are very common. Second thing, bad fuel delivery, like clogged fuel filter, weak pump, pressure regulator, or vacuum control to pressure regulator is bad. Later MAF. So that's are the 3 main causes of bad fuel trims. However, negative fuel trims are also occurring, but not so often like positive. But still, you need to figure out what have been done to the car, what have not been done to the car. So like I said, that's why I'm making series of these videos to you guys. You can rule out some things. First thing, do a leak down test, fuel pressure test, vacuum leaks by doing for example, the best test is the smoke machine test, just pumping a lot of smoke and pressure and watching for smoke. And if you don't know, or you're not able to do these tests, fuel trim, reading the fuel trims will tell you if there's a problem or not. That's the best tool. I call it tool, but that's the best tool to have at the beginning. if you haven't done any other test. If your fuel trims are fine, close to zero on both banks, why banks I'm gonna explain in a minute. If they are even on both banks, close to zero, you're fine. If you have different readings on different banks, for example, usually 4-cylinder car got one bank, 6-cylinder car got two banks, 8-cylinder car or engine might have 2 or 4 banks. So that was why they divided on banks, because if we have 4 cylinders, one bank means there's one pre-cat sensor and one post-cat sensor. 6-cylinder car, like straight 6, they divided on 2 banks, so the readings of O2 sensors gonna be more accurate, because there's gonna be 2 post and 2 pre-cat sensors. So if they did only one sensor, that's not gonna be very accurate. V8s, they got 2 or 4 banks, so there's more and more oxygen sensors. On my website, Elbow Grease DIY, I posted small picture. You can print or keep it somewhere in your files, so you can understand how fuel trims work, how to quickly refresh your memory, what's happening when it's adding or subtracting fuel. So there's a link on my website. There's a picture how this thing works. Is very easy. You can print it, keep it in your wallet, or put it in your garage on the wall. Let's say we have 6-cylinder engine, straight 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but they are divided on 2 banks, 2 exhaust banks. What that means, there's one pre-cat sensor, O2 sensor, one post-cat on each bank. We got catalytic converter, so if we have fuel trims on bank 1, for example, +2, and on the other one same +2, that means everything is running fine. There might be small issue with MAF, because MAF is controlling everything, not just one bank or second bank. Or fuel delivery is the same, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because fuel line is supplying fuel to both banks at the same ratio, let's say. But if, for example, we have an issue with one of the injectors at bank number 2, or spark plug, or coil, you're gonna see that in your fuel trims at one of the banks. But if everything is fine in here should be fine. There is a case when everything is fine except of O2 sensor. This is where there might be variety in readings. For example, 8, and here, for example, 0. So, for example, one of the sensors, O2 sensor, is bad, and usually they show rich. So fuel trim is gonna be negative. It will be subtracting fuel off the bank, one of the banks, and that's how it's gonna look like. But if the numbers are even on both banks, usually means the O2 sensors are fine and there's no issue. If you have both positive, for example 10, you should check the MAF, maybe fuel pressure, Coils not, because it's very unlikely that all 6 coils gonna go unless you got one big coil pack. But in BMW we have separate coils, but if you have one big coil pack, you have different car, you might check that. Maybe your spark plugs are bad, never been changed, or fuel filter. But if you're even on both banks, that means there's some kind of problem which is controlling whole situation, not just one bank. Now something for some people new, for some people not, but as we know, exhaust system got 2, the newer versions, car versions, engine version got 2 auto sensors. One is before cat and one is post cat, which is behind the cat. What's happening? Catalytic converter is like simply a honeycomb sieve or mesh which is heated up, which is made of ceramics or some kind of metals which are able to withstand higher temperatures. It's getting hot, and any gases, unburned stuff going through the cat are getting burned, like totally destroyed, and passing through another auto sensor. And some people saying it's just monitoring what the cat is doing, and it doesn't have any effect on fuel trims. And I tell you guys now, thanks to one guy on the forum, I was able to find out that actually post-cat auto sensor are able to change fuel trims and how the engine actually behaves. Because I had this problem when I used to like try to move the car on the parking lot, like taking foot off the clutch, and the engine felt like jerky, and for example you changing gears from 1 to 2nd, 3rd, 4th, there was always like this jerky move of the engine of the car, and I wasn't sure what's going on. And one guy on the forum said that all you guys saying things about those auto sensors, everything else, but nobody mentioned that, because all saying that it's got nothing to do, it's just measuring amount of gases or oxygen after the cat, and is actually telling the ECU about the health of the cat and nothing else. But it's actually, and some people actually saying that this auto sensor, it might do small adjustments of 1 or maybe 2% to overall fuel trims. And I think they are right, because he said have a look what your post-cat auto sensors are doing. And I actually checked. You're gonna be able to see small clip I did before and after replacement of these 2 sensors, which actually one was bad, the other one was okay, but because I got 2 banks and these sensors never been replaced, I replaced both. And as soon as I replaced the faulty one, which has actually been working but not fully as it should, like the other one was working, and when I replaced that, the car is smooth, there is no jerk when you changing the gears, anything like that. So I think these people are right. This auto sensor is feeding ECU with some kind of information, and ECU can take those information, combining them with those information, and create correct fuel trim for whole situation. So now you should be able to see the video I did before and after post-cat auto replacement.